We're watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
Joining me now, U.S. Representative French Hill. He represents Little Rock in the 2nd Congressional District. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Roby. Thanks for having me.
Right, Congressman, I appreciate you being here. You guys are out on break after like, what, 1,400 weeks? I mean,
it felt like a lifetime, 7 weeks in a row, and I think people were ready for a little time at home with their constituents and away from each other.
I'm going to begin with some politics first. It was just in the paper earlier, I guess about a week ago, that congressional filing fees are going to go up in Arkansas if the Republican Party sticks with what their executive committee has recommended, from $15,000 to $30,000. Do you support increase in filing fees to $30,000?
Well,
the Incumbent Protection Act is sometimes referenced.
Yeah.
So.
I had no idea about this. I heard about it after the committee action. Nobody asked our opinion about it. I love representing the people of Central Arkansas, so I'll pay whatever fee it takes to run as a Republican.
All right. And you are running for re-election?
I am running for re-election.
Just make sure we get that on the record.
Very
right there.
good.
So thank you. I never miss a beat, French. I never miss a beat. The Flatside Wilderness Area. This is something you've been working on for some time. Most recently, you're working to secure 2,200 acres. Tell me a little bit about that land space and what goes into deciding that something should be federally protected? Because I can make an argument for a million things that should be federally protected in terms of wilderness. So.
Well, quickly, Flatside Wilderness Area is the only federally designated wilderness area in the 2nd Congressional District. It was signed into law by President Reagan in 1984. The sponsors of that bill were Ed Bethune, my Republican predecessor in the 2nd District of Arkansas Congress, and Dale Bumpers, then the senator. And those were the first wilderness areas designated in the whole state of Arkansas since the Wilderness Act of 1964 passed. What is it? It's taking national park land or national forest land, so existing public lands, and designating them as wilderness. And what that means in practicality is no road building, no motorized vehicles. It's a place to hunt, fish, backpack, climb, camp, but in total pristine wilderness or outdoor recreation experience. And it's just to set that aside, and in our busy world, whether it was in 1964 or now in almost 2024, it's an important thing for people to have access to.
What I guess, to my deeper question there is, what goes into the decision making on that? I mean, how do you decide this piece of these 2,200 acres, but not these 2,200 acres?
So the Forest Service in the 1970s did a study of areas across the country to be eligible. That's what led to the 1984 designation. And back in 1984, these 2,000 acres I'm proposing were in the original proposal. And what are those characteristics? They go back to 1964. Is it a wilderness experience? Is it generally untouched by man? There are very few areas completely in Arkansas untouched by man due to settlement and timber business over a couple hundred years.
TV towers up on a big mountain or something. So.
But it meets those characteristics. So what I had done back in 2019 is I had the Forest Service resurvey these 2,000 acres. John Bozeman and I worked together on that, and they confirmed that this area is a good fit for Flatside.
Where does it stand in the process now? What will make it complete?
So we've introduced the bill in the House. We've met with the House Natural Resources Chairman, Bruce Westerman. You
got any pull with him?
I've got some pull with him. He does an outstanding job. And so I hope that this bill will be marked up in his committee sometime this year and that we can get it enacted over the next few months.
Does it almost spill into his district?
It does.
It does? Okay.
Well, no, it doesn't really spill. It's in Saline.
Close.
There's maybe a touch over towards Highway 7, but for the most part, it's in the 2nd District.
All right. Maybe you could throw a few more acres in there for him that would get that. All right, it was reported this past week Arkansas is going to receive a little over $1 billion for broadband investment. This is part of the infrastructure package that President Biden pushed. You did not vote for that bill.
That's right.
Do you regret not voting for that bill now that you've seen $1 billion come into the state for broadband?
Well, look, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that President Biden worked on with 11 senators and Nancy Pelosi in the House contained a lot of good ideas. But it's money that I thought personally was too much for too many projects around the country, and only about 10% of it even went to roads and bridges and core infrastructure. So I voted against it, and I think it's a contributor to the 40-year high in inflation. With that said, Arkansas has done very well in trying to roll out a broadband strategy. we've had about $600 or $800 million of federal money already come to Arkansas for broadband. And Brendan Carr, the FCC commissioner, in September of 2021 here in the Farm Bureau Broadband Summit, I think you were there, you moderated it, basically said it's not an amount of money, it's about deploying it carefully. And so Governor Hutchinson did a complete study to reassess how to spend that money. So we may have adequate money or we may not. And if we don't, one reason is because we have high inflation, which has driven up the cost by federal spending, and also by changing standards. So the bottom line is, I support broadband deployment. I've voted for broadband money to come to the state of Arkansas. And the fact that I voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill doesn't say that I'm against broadband expansion here. And
you were just
I believe
against that particular proposal.
That particular proposal. Yeah. And I think, look, I believe Hutchison's plan that's county by county can now be implemented and save taxpayers money. And I just would say, maybe in summary, I don't know that they need all $1 billion in Arkansas. That based on the Brendan Carr Summit comments.
Could always use $1 billion in Arkansas.
You know.
Come on, Congressman. All right, the SBA Inspector General issued a report recently on something that I know you have kept a watchful eye on, and that is COVID relief fraud.
Right.
Estimating that it could be as high as $200 billion. Do you really think that we could have had $200 billion in fraud through those SBA programs that, I mean, quite frankly, had banks involved with them?
Right.
And I just find that number extraordinarily high for potential fraud.
Well, in those two particular programs, that's a big number.
PPP and EIDL,
PPP,
right?
the Paycheck Protection Program, where people filled out a form through their bank and had money advanced to them, and then the Emergency Direct Loan Program, which was a little thinner documentation.
Yeah. I'll say that this went through two administrations, to the Trump administration and the
yeah.
Biden administration.
Well,
so this isn't a either or.
No, it's not. Yeah. This is a bipartisan concern. I think there was fraud. I hope the states, which have most of this money left now, we clawed back $28 billion of federal money from COVID in the debt ceiling bill that we talked about last time we were together. But there are billions of dollars still in the states that are being implemented under Joe Biden's rules, not Donald Trump's rules. And we need to make sure they've got the accountability and inspector general approach here. We've had problems here with the rental assistance program. Right here in Arkansas, I think there's a legislative audit review of that. So there's fraud that's being investigated. And the one thing we did set up as the pandemic initiated was robust inspector generals and the General Accountability Office work on this. And that's probably why we have this estimate, is because they're out there looking for it.
Yeah, some folks have criticized the way that estimate was put together, but we'll see where
it
it
but no, I
unfolds.
think it's a good point. It doesn't make any, to you and me, really, on this topic, if it's $50 billion, it's too much.
Yeah.
Right.
If it's $1 billion, it's too much, because we could be using that for broadband.
Exactly.
In the state of
See, this is the kind of, you should run for office. This is good. Yeah.
Not. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to be back with Congressman French Hill right after this word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the program. I'm joined by Congressman French Hill. As always, we appreciate you being here. All right, in late June, there was a revolt in Russia, I think. It just lasted for several hours. I'm really not sure what it is. Kind of unclear what the whole thing was. What's your assessment of what happened on that Saturday in late June? Where do you think things stand with Russia at this point?
Well, first, I think we've seen from the time that the tanks rolled into Ukraine back in February, a year ago, 18 months ago, February 24th, that the command and control, the intelligence suggestions, and the strategy of Putin were flawed. He thought there'd be no European response, no American response, and that the Ukrainians, I guess, were going to just roll over.
Yeah.
And
or
none of
welcome
that
them
happened.
with open arms.
Or greet them as
right,
victors, which is a propaganda deal. So I think it demonstrates the dysfunction inside the command and control of Putin's army, the lack of morale, the lack of discipline. And they now are defending a line that's longer than the Maginot Line during World War I of trenches from across the Donbass region. So I think it shows dysfunction. I don't know what it tells us about inside Russia when, as you say, it lasts a few hours and then we don't know what happens. Prigozhin goes to Belarus, but we've seen the defense minister on television as we tape this show, and so we know he's still in charge of the military, and this was the Wagner Group's goal to get him out. Yeah. So I think clearly There's a mystery there about what the rationale was or what Putin's response was, but what there's no mystery about is the dysfunction inside the Kremlin.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to quote something from The Hill, which is a publication. You're not related, I'm pretty sure, on this one, but The Hill is a publication that covers U.S. politics in the Capitol. 6 months into the new Congress, Speaker Kevin McCarthy is increasingly bending to the demands of the conservative fringe of his GOP conference, a dynamic highlighted this week by his surprise threat to impeach U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland. I do not put you in the camp of the conservative fringe in Congress. You're welcome for that. But assess for me what is happening internally with party politics, with Republican Party politics in the House.
Yeah, such a good question. So Speaker McCarthy, for listeners, it took 15 rounds to elect him Speaker. We had to bring consensus to our conference, all voices in our conference. We have Northeastern moderates, we have Ruby Rid District members in the South and the West, and we have Libertarian members of our conference. All had to come together. And what McCarthy had committed to, and why he's the Speaker of the House, is listening to all those voices of the conference, make sure they're all represented on committees, and we've talked about this before. So what's happening? Well, some people don't believe Jamie Comer, a very conservative guy, Jim Jordan, a very conservative guy, are being tough enough on Joe Biden, investigating the Hunter Biden laptop, investigating the weaponization of the FBI during really both the Obama and Trump administrations, to the discredit of the FBI, and investigating the origins of COVID and the border. So members are getting restless about that, and we've had some younger members, newer members, jump the gun on those investigations, is the way I would describe it. And so what McCarthy has argued, no, if you want to impeach somebody, that's great, but you're not going to imitate the Democrat strategy under Adam Schiff or Pelosi.
Or there is a process for doing that.
There is a process. And so this is McCarthy pulling that group of people back to the process, which is supported by Chairman Comer, Chairman Jordan, Chairman Mark Green, who's doing the investigation of the border security.
Do you support any of the impeachment, I guess, potential that's out there?
The way I would describe it is I support those committees doing their job to investigate Mayorkas's issues with the border. And look, I'm on the House Intelligence Committee now. I've read the Durham report. I've had Durham testify before our committee and before the Judiciary Committee. And I invite all Americans to look at that public report. What happened under the FBI at the end of Obama and during the Trump administration is appalling. At the top, which it takes nothing away from the loyal men and women who are our federal officers and special agents in charge in our cities, but it deserves investigation.
Lastly, we have not talked about your favorite subject, Donald Trump. So the front runner for the GOP nomination for president, since you and I last sat down, he has been indicted on some very serious charges related to his handling of classified materials. When you look at the polling, his standing has improved with Republican voters since that has happened. To paraphrase Brokeback Mountain, why can't the GOP quit Donald Trump?
Yeah. Well, I think that polling indicates what I mentioned a minute ago about the feeling of many of our citizens that we have a two-track justice system for similar charges where they don't know any nuance. I mean, many of our citizens just see this news on television. They don't understand how one person can be prosecuted effectively and maybe even put in jail or discredited, and another person's let off. And then this weaponization issue around the FBI for both Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Trump has left a bad taste in people's mouth. And I say that just at the top because I think that accounts for some of that polling improvement in my view. But I would say, as I've said to you before, I wish both political parties would turn to new nominees and have a vigorous debate about the future of the country and nominate someone who's younger, more vigorous, and speaks to the future of the United States. And for a Republican, I'm looking forward to this debate in August, which I think, who will have 40,000 donors? Who will have 2% of the vote? How will they handle that dynamic? This is not 2016. This is a new year. And
the
I'd like to see
2016 debates were so fun to watch.
They were, and the
entertaining.
2020 debates were bizarre. So I'd like to see that debate process. And then finally, my comment about the future of the party is I'm so upset with the fiscal condition of our country. I want to see a Republican president elected in 2024 that can serve 2 terms. So who can we nominate that can win? And who could serve 2 terms would be an ideal situation from my point of view on behalf of the future of our country.
All right, I got to leave it there with our time. U.S. Representative
Appreciate
French Hill,
it. Thanks,
always
Robert.
good to be with you.
with
Thanks for being
Thanks.
with us.